I'm at CPAC, where the president of Argentina just gave Elon Musk a chainsaw. Meanwhile, across town, the Department of Health and Human Services just took the first major step toward transgenderism from public life entirely. Kash Patel was just confirmed as the FBI director, and President Trump's National Economic Council director just floated getting rid of the federal income tax. So, just another week in Trump's second term. I'm Michael Knowles. This is The Michael Knowles Show. Welcome back to the show. April 15th is coming up. Will the income tax disappear before you have to pay your taxes? The hits keep on coming, man. I'm in DC. I was going to fly out right after I did my speech at CPAC. You'll have to tune in to figure out who we're eradicating this year. Then I went over, I did an interview for PBS NewsHour because ever since President Trump won again, news outlets that are traditionally quite left-leaning have been calling me up because they want to figure out why most Americans voted for Donald Trump. And so I was happy to speak with them. I think I scandalized them greatly, and many of their viewers, I think, were horrified to have heard from a conservative. But then we came back, we did a backstage show, also at CPAC, and then saw some friends around DC, and the hits just keep on coming. Every time I look down at my phone, there's new news. The big, I don't even know if I could say this is the biggest, but it's very, very big. Yesterday, Kash Patel was confirmed by the U.S. Senate as the next FBI director. This vote came down 51-49, so it was close. It was along party lines. The two squishy Republicans, Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, voted against him. But otherwise, it was fine. They didn't lose McConnell on the Republican side, so no need for J.D. Vance to break the tie. Why do I mention this? One, it's really important to have a good FBI director because there have been abuses at the FBI since 2016, 2015. Actually, it goes back a lot further than that. It got really, really bad under Biden. You had FBI agents spying on Catholic parishes. You had FBI agents going down raiding Mar-a-Lago, the home of the former president and the then leader of the political opposition. So really, really bad. It's good to have a serious reformer like Kash Patel in there. But the other great news about Patel getting through is pretty much all of Trump's nominees got through. Matt Gaetz was floated, and then he quickly pulled out, and Pam Bondi was able to get through. But pretty much all of the controversial nominees, Pete Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, Bobby Kennedy, Kash Patel, they got through. And then the less controversial candidates sailed right through, which is a really good sign, not just for President Trump being able to staff his administration, but also for President Trump being able to pass legislation. Because a lot of people have said, well, the executive orders, they're great, generally, I'm into them, but the next president, if he's a Democrat, could just rescind all of them on day one, minute one. So you gotta encode these things into law. And how are we gonna do that? Wrangling the US Congress, it's like herding cats. Well, if the nomination process, if the confirmation process is any indication, President Trump seems to be doing a pretty good job wrangling those Republicans on Capitol Hill. Seems like a sign of good things to come. Now, speaking of good things to come, good things being here, memorandum just came out from the Department of Health and Human Services. And this is being reported as a memorandum on transgenderism. It's a big victory against gender ideology. But it's even deeper than that. Because part of this people are not totally acknowledging. It actually speaks to what human life is. It's a major victory for the pro-life movement. I won't read the whole memorandum. It's guidance for federal agencies, external partners, and the public implementing Executive Order 14168, defending women from gender ideology extremism and restoring biological truth to the federal government, defining sex. It says, there are only two sexes, female and male, because there are only two types of gametes. An individual human is either female or male based on whether the person is of the sex characterized by a reproductive system with the biological function of producing eggs or sperm. Now, that's good enough. So that means there's no pansexual, no third gender, no 57th gender. That's all good. But to just say there are only two sexes, male and female, does not necessarily transgenderism. Because you could say, all right, there are two sexes, male and female, and sometimes females become males, and sometimes males become females, but there would still be two sexes, according to some gender ideologues. So HHS goes further. They say, the sex of a human, female or male, is determined genetically at conception, fertilization, and is observable before birth. So this is really important. This is saying that sex is immutable. It is determined genetically at conception, and it is observable before birth. That's good. Right there, okay, we're knocking down transgenderism. Obviously, it still exists in various parts of the law and regulations and in Supreme Court decisions, but here HHS is saying we're not buying trans. Well, what's really, really important here is it's determined genetically at conception, because HHS is acknowledging an obvious fact, but something that is politically incorrect among the left, which is life begins at conception, life begins at the beginning. This has all sorts of ramifications. This implies so much for abortion. This implies quite a lot, actually, for IVF. This implies a lot for abortifacient drugs. If life begins at conception, if that is now the official policy of the federal government, there are going to be myriad conclusions to be drawn from that. Really, really encouraging sign, especially after this IVF executive order, which a lot of people lost their minds over, but which didn't really do all that much. Just kind of directs the National Policy Council to look into ways to reduce costs. Okay, I don't want to sugarcoat it or anything, but if the day after you get that executive order, then you hear something from HHS, real firm policy being put in place by the agency saying, yeah, life begins at conception. We're even going to define conception as fertilization, not even implantation, which means that abortifacient drugs that attack babies that have been conceived, even if they haven't been implanted yet, would appear to violate the federal government's policy now. Oh yeah, and also transgenderism is done in public life. That is pretty good. That's the kind of thing that makes me want to get up, wave my American flag, and I want you to have the best American flag on the market, the one that I have, and that is from Allegiance Flag Supply. Go to showallegiance.com. I'm so excited by this new advertiser. The Allegiance Flag Supply American flags are simply the best American flags out there. Made in America. This is a great time to celebrate this great victory in the future of our country. Go get it today. One of the first songs I ever learned, I think the very first song I ever learned was It's a Grand Old Flag by George M. Cohan. He used to march around my grandpa's house, grandpa's house, singing it. I have flown an American flag in the back of my car, in the back windshield, since I got my car after college. I love a good American flag, okay? And I've been in the market for a while for a good, nice, new American flag for the front of my house. And here comes Allegiance. Because so many of these flags are just kind of like cheap, foreign nonsense. Right now, when you go to showallegiance.com, you can save $35 off your complete flag set. That is showallegiance.com for American flags made by Americans for Americans. Meanwhile, back at CPAC, Javier Milei, the president of Argentina, just gave Elon Musk a chainsaw.
Hi, my friend! How you doing?
Good, how's it going? Hey.
I have a bracelet for you.
Thanks.
On the day I was born, the nurses all gathered around.
Well, that's cool.
The nurse spoke up to leave this one alone.
Look at me, look at
And I
me.
was bad to the bone.
Look at me.
Put it in a Thursday photo.
You get the picture. I really liked too, Elon had his kids with him, and it was like, oh wow, a chainsaw. You know, probably not the best thing for the kids to play with. I actually got to meet Elon either right before or right after this happened. I had never met the man in person before, got to shake his hand, got to see his kids, very, very cool. Really nice guy, very funny guy. And Milei obviously has a sense of humor too, because he gives Elon this chainsaw. Now, there is some deeper political meaning here. Obviously, Milei, arch-libertarian, so libertarian he's converting to Judaism. Okay, that is a serious commitment to libertarianism. But he is a real, slasher of budgets and economic pork down in Argentina. And he's giving this slasher to Elon Musk for doing the same thing here in the U.S. government. It's a libertarian celebration. But I think the deeper political problem here is, I don't think Trump got elected. I don't think Trump won the popular vote because people suddenly became libertarians. And yet that is what we're getting. What we're getting is Elon Musk, an exemplar of Silicon Valley, of innovation, of upsetting the status quo. In his ideology, seems to be a libertarian, just slashing, cutting spending, teaming up with, or culturally at least, teaming up with Javier Milei here. I don't know. I don't think that is why Trump was able to pull 1 in 5 black male voters, half of Hispanics, 40% of women under the age of 30. I think there were all sorts of reasons why people voted for Trump, but I think a big part of it was they want less migration. Libertarians don't want less migration. I don't think Elon wants less migration. I think he wants more migration. He just wants more legal migration. So that, I don't know, that seems to be a little bit of a break between the base and this empowered class. What about, I don't know, trade policy? I'm not sure that the libertarians are all that gung-ho about the tariffs, which is really the centerpiece of President Trump's trade policy. All I'm saying is, it's a cool scene and everyone loves what Elon is doing at Doge. I think it's magnificent. I think he's one of the all-time great political figures of my lifetime. But I like what Elon is doing at Doge because it's rooting out corruption. I think libertarians are more focused on how it's rooting out waste and government spending and it's reducing the size and scope of the government and this, that, and the other thing. My issue with USAID is that it was being used to advance leftism. I don't really care that it was spending money. I think at some point that traditionalism or that populism or that more classical conservatism is going to clash with the libertarianism. I don't know when it's going to happen. Right now, everyone's playing nice and everyone's really happy with the results, but I think that will happen at some point. Now, Elon, after receiving his chainsaw, goes on stage with Rob Schmidt from Newsmax and addresses one of the stupidest criticisms I've seen made at Elon Musk, namely that he is spending this time, not being paid for it, giving up his very, very valuable time to go in and reform the federal government so that he can, steal your Social Security check or something.
Saying right now that the reason that you want to get into Social Security, that you want to get into all of these into Treasury and things like that, is that you're looking for personal information and you're trying to make more money.
Yeah.
I've never met anybody as rich as you that cared less about money in my life. Every time I hear a story about you, you're sleeping on a couch of some other guy in a city that you could buy the entire thing.
Yeah,
I don't think you care about money, do you?
No, actually, I mean, listen, if I steal some Social Security, I can finally buy nice things.
Yeah. And
Great answer from Elon. I love that Elon, he pauses. He doesn't just answer right away. He's not like a politician where he's totally fluent and he's always got the right word ready. And he sits, kind of laughs, he shrugs, he goes, yeah, if I steal someone's Social Security check, I can finally buy nice things. Says the man worth $400 billion. This is the way to respond to these kinds of attacks from the left. You just have to kind of laugh at them. Yeah, that's why Elon, with 5 or 6 historically successful companies, Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, in terms of just raw dollars, not inflation adjusted, the richest man ever in the history of the world. This guy got involved in the government to get your financial information. This is the guy, by the way, who owned PayPal. that more than 70% of American adults have used. He got in it to steal your like $400 Social Security check. Yeah, I don't think so. All you can do is laugh. Now, speaking of revenue to the government, big news coming out of the White House. This care of Kevin Hassett, the director of President Trump's National Economic Council, who floated the idea of getting rid of the income tax.
President Trump has spoken about replacing income tax with tariff revenue, especially with all this waste, fraud, and abuse that we're seeing cut. Is that a possibility?
Absolutely. And in fact, if you think about the China tariff revenue that we're estimating is coming in from the 10% that we just added, plus the de minimis thing, that it's between $500 billion and $1 trillion over 10 years is our estimate. And that's something that is outside of the reductions that markets are seeing through the negotiations up on the Hill. And so we expect that the tariff revenue is actually going to make it much easier for Republicans to pass a bill, and that was the president's plan all along.
That's big news. And President Trump has talked about this on the campaign trail. He's suggested, we're going to go back to the McKinley era. Now, the McKinley era, notably, was before the federal income tax. It was the history of the income tax in the United States goes back basically to the Civil War. It was floated during the War of 1812, but then the war wrapped up, so it became a moot point. We did not have a federal income tax until the Revenue Act of 1861, which was a flat tax on incomes over $800. Now, to put that in perspective, $800 in 1861 is something like $400,000 today. It was a flat 3% income tax. Then that was repealed in 1872. And then there were all sorts of different revenue-raising instruments, but we didn't really have a federal income tax until the 16th Amendment in 1913, during the Progressive Era. So when Trump comes out here and he says, look, we're going to go back to the McKinley way of doing things. We're going to get all of our revenue from tariffs. And who knows, we don't even need the income tax. We'll so offset. Now, again, I'm a little skeptical of being able to shift those numbers so quickly, but that would be pretty cool, man, if I didn't have to pay an income tax anymore. I guess what's so amazing about this story is not even the notion that you might not have to pay an income tax anymore, that somehow maybe they'll repeal the 16th Amendment or just not enforce an income tax. What's so amazing is that we're even having this conversation. 15 years ago, the idea that a Republican would campaign on tariffs was unthinkable. Today, we have the Republican president and his top economic advisors talking about using tariffs so aggressively that we don't have an income tax anymore. It's that line from Cardinal Manning, there were many beautiful lines from Cardinal Manning, one of which is, there is a day to come that will reverse the confident judgments of men. The dizzying pace of Trump's first month is so encouraging, not even just because of all the individual things he's done, virtually all of which have been great, but because it means we can still do things. Trump just basically closed up the border. The illegal border crossings just dropped to nearly zero. We can just do things. We can just rename the Gulf of Mexico. We can just slap tariffs around the world. We can maybe get rid of the income tax. Maybe. But we can do things. We can still control our country. Meanwhile, back at CPAC, J.D. Vance made a beautiful statement, in a series of beautiful statements in recent weeks. He was asked about the Christian faith, and he made a really, really important point about the meaning of Christianity.
First is, I believe the fundamental tenet of the Christian faith, it's not just a set of good moral principles, though it is that. I think the fundamental tenet of our faith is that the Son of God became man, he died, and then he raised himself from the dead. That is the fundamental tenet of the Christian faith, and I think so much flows from that. And I think one lesson that flows from that is that we shouldn't fear death. Of course, death is a very bad thing, but there are much more terrible things than just losing one's life, and importantly, you could lose one's soul. And I think whether it's fighting for the unborn or fighting for peace and security for our citizens, I want us to be the kind of society where my kids can grow up to be virtuous young people, can be good young Christians, of course, because that's what I'm trying to raise them to be, and that's what our public policy is trying to do.
Beautiful. This is straight out of C.S. Lewis, not just C.S. Lewis, but out of many, many Christian writers. And it's contradicting the prevailing spirit of the age, which says, if it says anything nice about Christianity at all, it says, oh, Jesus was a nice moral teacher. That's really, we should just learn some lessons because he was, and J.D. Vance is saying, no. He's really not primarily a good moral teacher. The essential fact is that God becomes man and dwells among us and is crucified and is raised from the dead. That's the really important part. The parables are important. Every word uttered by our Lord is important. I don't mean to diminish the importance of his teachings. But what matters is God becomes man. God sends his only begotten Son, the second person of the Holy Trinity. God becomes man, dwells among us, is crucified, dies and is buried, and then is resurrected on the third day. That tells us really practical things about human nature, about our relationship to God, about the forgiveness of sins, about life everlasting, about the meaning of life, about our purpose, at the very least, about how we ought to view death. Because from the political perspective, the resurrection of our Lord is the ultimate political revolution. Inasmuch as the ultimate power that rulers have in pagan societies is the fear of death, that they can punish and kill subjects. And the resurrection of our Lord says, actually, death has no ultimate power on you. That is profoundly important. It is the fact that created our civilization, allowed our civilization to flourish. Even if you don't believe in it, though you should, because all the evidence is for it, but even if you don't believe in it, you have to recognize that is a crucial, pun intended, fact about the civilization once known as Christendom. Now, on that momentous note, I want to tell you about Momentous. Go to livemomentous.com, use promo code Knowles. Success is not built on resolutions. Those are made to break. Success is built on taking action and building unstoppable momentum. When it comes to optimizing your health span, living better and longer, certain things are non-negotiable. Quality sits at the top of the list. In the world of performance-focused supplements, Momentous stands alone. Their commitment to NSF certification means every batch undergoes rigorous testing for heavy metals, harmful additives, and label accuracy. You know, sweet little Elisa is pretty serious about making sure we don't have anything that's going to turn the frogs gay in the house or whatever. You know, they don't like with the plastics and the this and the that. Okay, one of the first things, even Mr. Davies, not just me, it's even Mr. Davies, said about Momentous is he said, you know, this is Molly approved. Even my crunchy wife says this is good stuff. Okay, NFL teams trust it. It's great. Are you ready to start living on purpose? Go to livemomentous.com. Use code Knowles, Knowles, for 20% off your order today. My favorite comment yesterday is from CJ Blake, RF7MV, who says, the racist South African DJ is using the English language because it's inferior, LMAO. That's a good point. There was this guy who is South African, he's a black guy, and he was saying, the whites are inferior, they're Neanderthals, they are subhuman, they are this, they are that. But of course, one notices, he is speaking in English. You know, it's not a lot of clicking or any of it. It's not Swahili. It's not. I don't really know what the indigenous language of South Africa is, but it ain't that. He's speaking in English. So you know, if the white people are so inferior, I don't know, why are you allowing their language to actually form the substance of your conscience? Crazy stuff. Now, speaking of moral clarity, the State Department has officially classified a bunch of criminal cartels, drug cartels at the southern border, as foreign terrorist organizations. The U.S. Department of State designated 6 Mexican drug cartels, plus MS-13, which is a Salvadoran criminal syndicate, plus the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, which recently took over Aurora, Colorado. Trump has designated them as foreign terrorist organizations. So this is the State Department following up on an executive order which instructed them to do that. Now it's happened. What does it mean practically? I think some people hear this. They heard the executive order. They hear this news report out of the State Department. They think it means that we're going to be harsher in our rhetoric about the drug cartels. Means we're going to, really start to think seriously about them. No. That designation brings with it real power to the government to take them on. Notably, it means that the commander-in-chief can now use the military against them. I said the moment that Trump announced that he was going to reclassify these drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, I said, so that means he's going to send in a ton of special operators to just blow these guys' tattooed faces off in the middle of the night. Previously, he was somewhat restricted in unleashing the full force of the U.S. military. Now he can do really whatever he wants. Also, now that these groups are foreign terrorist organizations, it becomes illegal for U.S. persons to provide material support to them, which means that people who are operating in the United States, maybe who are United States citizens, maybe who in some way have legal status, but they're working with these organizations because those organizations control the border, and many people who cross the border illegally wind up in debt to these organizations. Well, now it means that those people are committing crimes. Perhaps they could even be deported. This means that the Trump administration can deny entry to people who are linked to these groups, makes it easier to stop them from coming here in the first place, means that the U.S. can coordinate international efforts to stop them. The same way we're able to form an international coalition to take out Saddam Hussein, we can form an international coalition to fight ISIS. Now we can do the same thing for MS-13 or Tren de Aragua or any of the other cartels, which pose a far more direct and serious threat to the United States even than ISIS. And then, what it also means is Trump is now free to digitally and financially attack their organizations with far greater severity than they were able to before. All good stuff. This is all really, really good news. Now, a little bit of bad news. There's a report out on Mr. Kanye. It says Kanye West has relapsed and is inhaling nitrous oxide, leaving his memory messed up. Now, you might have heard, I think these reports have been published, that Kanye has an affinity for laughing gas, for nitrous oxide. And I think Milo Yiannopoulos, who was his campaign manager when he was running for president briefly, I think he testified about this. So one doesn't wish to reveal any personal sins, but this has all been reported in the press. In any case, this is what the report says. Kanye West is back huffing laughing gas again, multiple concerned sources tell the Post. This is the New York Post. When he got back to LA, he got dental work again, and I think that's when he relapsed, a friend said, referencing his return to the city after 6 months away at the end of January. The 47-year-old rapper and clothing designer's recently erratic behavior has worsened by using nitrous oxide, commonly known as laughing gas, an anesthetic. I don't want to reveal any personal sins of Kanye. I don't want to engage in the sin of detraction. I'm not, Kanye is an eccentric figure and has been for a long time. But there's an important lesson here. If this report is true, there seems to be some evidence that it's true. Political nerds like you and me, we tend to think a lot about ideology. God, did you see the tweet that Kanye sent? He said in all caps that he's a Nazi. And then he was tweeting about doing stuff with various people and different threats. And then he was tweeting out how much he loved porn. And then he was just tweeting out porn. And did you see all the tweets from, wow, what does it mean? What's the ideology? Did he read Mein Kampf one day? And often, behavior is just best explained by vice, by habitual vice, which darkens the intellect and messes up our appetites. It's kind of it. When people come to me, like when guys come to me, sometimes they write into the show. Many times they write into the show. They say, I have this problem. I have a problem with women. I'm fighting with my girlfriend, I'm fighting with my wife, or I can't attract a girl, and I go on these dates and it's not satisfying, and this, that, and the other. They complain about their relationship issues. My first question, always, do you look at pornography? Do you look at porn? Now, I'm not getting in your head on your grand theories of romance and your understanding of what marriage is. Does it match up with the traditional view and the catechism? And let me just add one quick question. Do you look at porn? You do? Okay, wow. So you look at this obscene material that we know warps people's minds and appetites and desires and actually messes up even their biochemistry, and it totally shifts how you view women. And now you're telling me you have problems with women? Wow. Huh, okay. Hey, come back to me again when you stop doing that. I think with Kanye. Okay, he's tweeting all this crazy stuff. Is it because he read Mein Kampf and he watched Triumph of the Will and now he's just suddenly so taken with Hitler's arguments? Yeah, maybe. Or maybe he just has a drug problem or something, you know? And actually a porn problem, speaking of. And we know that because he admits that publicly. Maybe we can fix a lot of the problems that we attribute to ideology just by correcting our behavior and cutting out some vice and practicing virtue. I suspect that would go a very, very long way. And then we don't need to be nerds arguing about abstract ideology forever. Now, speaking of vice, transgender cult members who are vegans have been arrested and charged with murder in Maryland. That's a plot twist, right? Not really. Not really. You know, I've spoken my mind on the gender ideology for a long time, including at CPAC, where I am right now. And I've spoken on many topics, though, and I've been involved in plenty of political campaigns, and I have plenty of ideological interests that I speak on. I rarely have an unexpressed opinion. And the only times that I have been threatened with violence or nearly attacked or actually attacked have been when I have criticized transgenderism or contradicted transgenderism. First time was at UMKC, University of Missouri, Kansas City, in 2017 or 2018. Second time was at the University of Pittsburgh recently, where Antifa terrorists tried to blow up the building and actually seriously injured a cop when I was walking on stage. Both times it was about transgenderism. So I'm not surprised. These are very violent political groups, trans in particular. Okay, but the thing that's kind of funny is the vegan thing. Though it makes sense. Every vegan you know, I bet, just about, is in favor of abortion. They would never harm the Delta smelt. They won't eat an anchovy, but they'll happily kill a human baby. But this story is pretty crazy. Just the broad strokes of it. It's this cult called the Zizians. They are linked to several deaths. Andy Ngo, a great reporter, especially on Antifa, has a great thread on the subject. The Zizians have been tied to the killing of a U.S. Border Patrol agent, David Maland, near the Canadian border. They've been linked to 5 other homicides in Vermont, Pennsylvania, California. You know what I say to this transgender, murderous vegan cult? So much for the tolerant left, you know? So much for the tolerant left. I hate that phrase. It's just like the laziest phrase you could possibly hear in political commentary. Because, of course, the left is not peaceful or tolerant at all. But these people in particular are seriously misanthropic. And it really is always the ones you most expect. Because when we're talking about this kind of people in particular, they are divorced from reality. They have a fundamental misunderstanding of the world, or a willful misunderstanding of the world. And they are misanthropic in the truest sense, in that they hate their own actual human identities. And they hate human identity, period, and the fact that our identities are linked with our bodies and we don't have a choice over it and we can't change it. That is serious misanthropy, and it is why they are angry a lot of the time and why they become violent and in some cases commit murders. Okay, the best reason to become a Daily Wire Plus member, you are directly supporting the fight. Every dollar goes right back into building a real alternative to the establishment legacy mainstream media. That means more shows, more movies, more investigative journalism. This is how we continue to reshape the culture. Here's another reason. If you like this show, there is more of it waiting for you. Only Daily Wire Plus members get exclusive content at the end of every episode. The show after the show, live chats, much more. Do not just listen, be a part of it. Download the Daily Wire Plus app or go to dailywire.com/subscribe and become a member today. Finally, we've arrived at my favorite time of the week when I get to hear from you in the mailbag. This mailbag is sponsored by Pure Talk. Get your iPhone 14 or Samsung Galaxy for $0 with a qualifying plan by going to puretalk.com/Knowles. Take it away.
Hey Mike, so I just saw your fantastic debating performance in that Jubilee video where you were talking to a bunch of LGBTQ activists. One of the things that they kept trying to do was accuse you of being poorly motivated. And one of the guys afterwards was saying, all you do is try to get people to have emotional reactions to what you say so that you can make them look dumb. And my whole thing is, even if that were the case, who cares? They should still be able to win the debate if they're right. Like, who cares how poorly motivated you are? That should make it easier for them to take apart your arguments. And in my opinion, the only people that complain about their opponent's tactics are losers. And there are a lot of people complaining about your tactics that evening. So what are your thoughts? Would that be something that you would employ in another debate? Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, their premise is false. I understand you're saying, well, even if the premise were true, what would it matter? But their premise is false. They're saying that I wish ill on them, or that one guy said I was just trying to push his buttons, but that is very much not what I do. In fact, I'm kind of rare in political commentary and even on the right in that I really am not just provoking for provoking's sake. I'm happy to be convinced by nuance or subtlety or whatever. I maintain my composure. I don't use nasty, obscene language or anything like that. So I don't know. I think the reason that so many of those interlocutors maligned me and questioned my motives is because they had nothing else to say. They couldn't answer the point, the arguments. So they just said, well, you're a meanie or something. But your point is quite good. Yeah, even if I hated their guts, they should still just answer the arguments. But of course they can't. Next question.
Hey, Michael. As a Catholic preparing for an upcoming marriage, I've been revisiting the Gospels to strengthen both my relationship with God and the Church. In this pursuit, I've become curious about the non-canonical Gospels, particularly the Gospel of Thomas. Do you believe these non-canonical works hold any value for study or spiritual growth, especially for someone seeking to deepen their faith? Thanks for your time and all the incredible work you do.
Good question. No, they don't. They have value as quirks of the 4th century. They have value as evidence of what the Gnostics believe, not of what the Christians believe, but of what the Gnostics believed. They have value in as much as they're weird, and that's illuminating in some ways. But no, they don't have any value for Christians. And we know this from antiquity. Early Christian writers discuss the Gospel of Thomas, so-called Gospel of Thomas. But even to call it a gospel, albeit a non-canonical gospel, is really giving it much more credit than it deserves. The actual Gospels are written within living memory of the events that they describe. The so-called Gospel of Thomas is from the 4th century. It's like centuries later. And it depicts a person who might be named Jesus, but who is a rather different person than the actual Jesus. You'd even have to be specific on what you mean by the Gospel of Thomas. There are 2 books that purport to be Gospel of Thomas. One is a sayings gospel, just purported quotes of our Lord, which are not real. And then the other is the infancy gospel, which involves all sorts of heretical nonsense. So no, if you are seeking to deepen your Christian faith, then you should read the Christian works. The Church Fathers, the ecumenical councils, they did a good job at figuring out which books are legit and which books are not. And I don't think we need to upend that with 4th century Gnostic nonsense. Next question.
Happy Feast of St. Valentine, love Dr. Knowles. It's the Shuckmeister, and I'm checking myself in for a little dating advice. I've had a hard time getting past the first date. I've been trying to date more traditional girls, especially those from the Latin Mass, and they seem the least likely to want to go on a second date. I just do the typical date activities like dinners and outings, instead of rizzing them up with my diatribes about the Fourth Lateran Council. I feel like I'm finally in a place where I've cultivated a lot of virtue and I'm ready for something more, but the dating pool is very, very poor right now. I know you always say dating should be fun, and you're right, until I get ghosted or rejected. What would you recommend in my situation? Thanks.
Yeah, you're in a tough spot. And folks, I know the Shuckmeister. I personally know many of the members of the Crème de la Crème, but I know the Shuckmeister because I see him at Latin Mass. So, lovely gals there. But one issue about dating at the Latin Mass, I've heard this for years now. Dating at the Latin Mass is kind of like dating in Alaska. The odds are good, but the goods are odd. And I say this as someone who attends the Latin Mass. I love the Latin Mass. I love it more than almost anything in this world. But, it attracts a quirky kind of set. So your problem, Chuck, since I know you personally, I can say you're a normal kind of guy. You dress well, you speak normally, you want to take a woman out to a nice dinner. But if you want to date at the Latin Mass, you need to show up in like a horse-drawn carriage with mules, and you need to go take the woman to milk some cows or something and churn butter. You got to do, you're too normal. And it's a problem. So I don't mean to be glib in my response to you. I know it's tricky out there. But what would I look at? If I were you, I would look at, keep looking around the TLM, there's some nice ladies around there. But you might also look more broadly at Catholic social groups. There are plenty of them. You might look at friends of friends. I think that's really helpful. I know it's not abstract enough for modern liberal sensibilities, but I think like people you've gone to school with, or people that you've worked with, or friends of friends, or being set up on blind dates, or that sort of thing. I think that's good. I think the personal connection is a good thing. But I would expand that circle out a little bit. I understand why, in principle, one would say, well, the Latin Mass is the first place to go. It's probably the first place that I would go to look if I were single. God forbid if I were single. But, if it's not working out, all right, expand it out a little bit. Maybe look at that Catholic young adult, whatever, or mid-20s meetup group or whatever. I would just expand it out a little bit. It's okay, and keep going on dates, and keep being your normal self. I'm not saying you really need to hire the mule-drawn carriage and go churn butter. You are who you are. You're going to be a charming guy in your own right. Go for that. All right, last one. This is parental advice.
Hello, Mr. Knowles. I am looking for some advice on how to effectively and yet respectfully communicate a difference of religious opinions to one's parents. I grew up in a very non-denominational charismatic household. My father and my uncle, in fact, my entire family is very, very conservative and religious. However, I have recently converted to the Anglo-Catholic Church, and I know you might not consider it to be Catholic, but coming from my background, my parents certainly find it to be much too Catholic. They've largely accepted, or at least realized, that I am staunch in my decision, yet I still get videos about explain the saints, explain this aspect, make sure you don't listen too much to tradition, make sure you still allow freedom, which are true things, but there's always just this undertone of what you're doing is a little silly or you should come back to us. So I'm wondering how I might responsibly and effectively communicate a difference of opinion on something with my parents. On a separate note, when is there going to be some nice, juicy, delicious Mayflower pipe tobacco? I love cigars, but I love pipes even more. I look forward to a response. Thanks.
The pipe tobacco, it's not my expertise. I smoke a pipe once a year, and I have for probably 20 years, but I'm just not good enough at it. I can't. Cigars are a little bit of an expertise, so I know I can make a great cigar product, but the pipes, we'll have to leave it. Maybe we'll create a subsidiary with you. As for your parents, it's kind of interesting that you've converted to Anglo-Catholicism, which is Anglicanism. It's a form of Protestantism, but it's a high church Protestantism that has a lot of trappings of Catholicism and even a fair bit of Catholic theology, but no pope. And it's just it's interesting. There aren't that many people who convert to Anglo-Catholic Protestantism. Andrew Klavan is one who has done that too, and he loves his Anglo-Catholic church. So that alone, it's quite interesting. And it's understandable if your parents are lower church Protestants who, not only don't like the liturgical aspects of what you're getting into now, but probably disagree on a lot of theological things. It's perfectly understandable. And they're your parents, and you owe them respect. So when they ask you questions, it's a great opportunity to answer those questions. People ask me all the time, why do you confess your sins to a priest? Why do you believe that our Lord is really and truly present in the Eucharist? Why do you pray to Mary? Why do you do this, that? What a great opportunity to tell them the scriptural basis for those practices and beliefs. What a great opportunity to deepen your own understanding of what you believe. What a great opportunity to maybe pull them over. That's great. Now, when they say, don't do this, don't do that, when they start haranguing you about it, you can say, listen, Mom and Dad, I'm just telling you, this is biblical. And then hopefully we'll get to pull you all the way across the Tiber too, so that you come all the way to Rome. But in any case, you could say, look, this is a biblical practice. Confession is biblical. The Eucharist is biblical. Look, in the writings of the church fathers, very early church fathers, you can see the Eucharist, the belief in the true presence of Christ in the Eucharist. You see it in Scripture too, in John chapter 6. And it's an opportunity to evangelize. What more could you ask for? Okay, no member block today because I'm still here in the imperial capital and I got to get out of Dodge. So I apologize that we've not had sufficient membrum segmentum this week because of, the DailyWire shuts down for 3 snowflakes and then I fly to DC. But I don't know, we need to do extra membrum segmentum next week. I look forward to it. I'm Michael Knowles. This is The Michael Knowles Show. See you then.